Hey, this is Ralph, and in this video, or a couple of videos, I'd like to see how we can create this visual effect over at TED.com using a background image and then a very blurred version of that same background image with a text overlay. Okay, so the other week one of my students pointed this out and they liked how this looks on TED, and I do too. So basically TED.com has a feature video where they show a background image still from that particular talk. And then down here they have this caption area with a very heavily blurred version of this. Now, after doing a little bit of research, I did discover that this is simply the same background image used up here, but it's the lower part. And it's hard to tell on this one, and this image changes every day. But basically, you can kind of see here's the pink and purple part over here on the left. It's heavily blurred, and then it gets a little bit darker going across, and that's heavily blurred. And you can kind of just see the hint of redness in the lower part here too from the floor of the stage. So pretty cool effect and not very complicated to create. So let's try to tackle this. Now, before I turned on the recorder, I did start up a page. I'm using Atom here, A-T-O-M, as my editor. So I've got a blank page, the body. Now I do have a little reference to an attribute to a photographer in here. And then I'm going to use internal styles, and I have a generic reset rule with margin, padding, border, and box sizing. So I will be using those. And also I went and grabbed an image to use. So I just jumped over to unsplash.com and I grabbed a photo here that had good mixes of color with kind of a medium to darkish background, so that way you could really see that the blur was being applied to the lower part of the photo itself. So I will be using that, and I put an attribute to the photographer on there. All right, well, let's get to it. So the first thing I'm going to work on is in the body, and I'm going to create myself, I'm going to use a figure for this. So I'll use a figure tag, and I'm going to call it feature 1. And I want this to be self-contained, so it would be easy to reuse multiple times on a web page or throughout a website and things like that. And I'm calling it feature 1 in case in the future you ever wanted to make a feature 2, because you notice they have smaller versions of this that uses a white background for the bottom part versus the blurry background. Within this, I'm going to go ahead and create a Figcaption. And then within that Figcaption, I'm going to use a div, feature BG for the background, and that can be an empty div. And I'm also going to go ahead and throw in a paragraph, which will be my text overlay for the caption. And there we go, and that's pretty good. Now, of course, TED also has, oh no, they don't have any text up there. So, yep, no need to have any text up in that top portion. So basically, this is all I need in the HTML. I've got a figure that's given a class so that I can distinguish it from other figures, and then there's a Figcaption in there that's going to have my blurry background, and it's also going to have my paragraph text overlay. So that takes care of the HTML side of things. Now, of course, there's really nothing exciting to see here, so if I went to my version of the page and refresh, all you see is that text. We really need to do some work in the styling. So I'm going to go ahead and style my feature 1. So my feature 1, I'm going to go ahead and set it with a width of about 600 pixels and a height of about 400 pixels. So that'll give it some substance. I'm going to set its margin to be 50 pixels top and bottom, auto margin left and right. That's going to center it on my web page just for demonstration purposes. But here's what we really need. Background image, URL, and I'm just going to put in unsplash.jpg, which is the name of the photo that I saved, and then I'm going to do background size cover. I like that one a lot. So let me save this and refresh so you can see what happens here. And we can see that what background size cover does is it stretches the width and the height of the background image so it fills up the space. Now, the image that I happen to use is a little bit taller than it is wide, so it's more of a portrait orientation than it is a landscape orientation. So if I wanted to background position, I could control the X and the Y positioning. I'm actually okay with the Y positioning, but I'll set it as 50% to center it. You're probably not going to notice anything from that, but maybe I'll move it up a little bit. I don't know, could I do something like negative 20%? Let's see what happens there. Yeah, so it shifts it up a little bit higher, makes more of the focus on the couple. So I think I'm satisfied with that, so I think I'm going to keep it there. However, I am running the risk that not every photo would need this. So whenever you do start to apply styles to an element like this, you want to say, wait, is this something I'm going to do all the time or only for this photo? So in theory, I should have a better background image that's more shaped like what I'm going to need. But I think that's good enough for now. So let's work on the Figcaption. And I'm going to do it this way. .feature1 Figcaption. Now for this Figcaption, I'm going to end up positioning it absolutely. And since I want to position it absolute, I'm going to put position relative in its parent container, the feature1, which is the figure. And so for this one, I'm going to do position absolute, and I'll position it 0 pixels from the left and 0 pixels from the top. Now because I'm doing a position here, I'm going to have to set its width to be 100%, which is normally the default for a block element, but when I position, it's going to shrink it down. So I have to put it back to 100% width, and I'm going to set its height to be 25%. So you can really visualize this. I'm going to put a temporary background color of orange on here so it'll really stand out to you. And oops, I can see it's up there. I don't want to position it from the top. I really want to position it to the bottom. But you'll see that now my Figcaption is covering up part of the main background image. That's not what's happening here. The Figcaption is actually below that photo. So instead of positioning 0 pixels from the bottom, I'm going to do negative 25% from the bottom. And that'll end up pushing it below the image. Okay, and background image, and I'm going to end up using the same image that I used before. But then I'm going to do background position Y. Where's the Y? 100%. And what this is going to do for me, it's going to position so that I'm seeing the bottom part of the background image. So I can see just this lower portion here. Now, I think I would still like to do background size cover to make sure I'm getting that lined up. Now this, I wasn't planning this. I'm kind of repiecing this image together based on how the just working out that way. So I'm going to go with this illusion here, even though that wasn't part of my intention. I think in the next video we'll finish this off and we'll go ahead and do the blurriness and we'll mess with the text overlay.